Operation Paperclip. Roger, do you copy me?
When the war ended in 1945, the world celebrated the defeat of a monster. The swastika had fallen, Hitler was dead, and Europe, scarred, burned, but free, breathed for the first time in years. Cities lay in rubble, millions were displaced, and the air itself smelled of death and liberation. The Allies had promised justice. The Nuremberg trials began. The architects of horror were supposed to face the gallows. Yet, while the world looked toward punishment and closure, a new and silent war had already begun. One that would blur the lines between good and evil more than any battlefield ever could. America, the land that had fought to crush fascism, was quietly extending its hand to the very men who had built its war machine. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, doctors, the intellectual backbone of Hitler's regime. Men who had overseen slave labor, conducted grotesque medical experiments, and designed the weapons that rained terror upon London and Warsaw. Now, these same men were being courted, hidden, and protected by the United States government. The reason was simple: knowledge. Knowledge that could win the next war, the Cold War. Operation Paperclip was born not from mercy, but from fear. The fear of the Soviet Union, of communism, of being left behind in the race for supremacy. To America's new intelligence elite, the horrors of Nazism were secondary to the promise of power. As one war ended, another, colder, quieter, but equally ruthless, was just beginning. In the ruins of Germany, agents of the U.S. Army's intelligence branch scoured through laboratories, bombed research centers, and collapsed bunkers. Their orders were clear: find the scientists, find the blueprints, find anything that could give the United States an edge. While Berlin smoldered, men with clipboards and code names made lists of names, addresses, and areas of expertise. It wasn't long before they realized the magnitude of what they were gathering. The Germans had been working on technology far beyond anything the Allies possessed: jet propulsion, guided missiles, nerve agents, and even early concepts of spaceflight. Their rocketry team, based at Piemont, had built the V-2, humanity's first long-range ballistic missile. It was a weapon born of terror, assembled by slave laborers in underground tunnels, where thousands perished. Yet its creators were geniuses. To the Americans, they were irresistible. Wernher von Braun was one of them. A charismatic engineer, barely in his 30s, with the cold brilliance of a man who could dream of the stars while ignoring the screams beneath him. He and his team had built weapons for Hitler, but in their hearts they claimed to serve science. When the Reich began to crumble, von Braun didn't wait to be captured by the Soviets. He gathered his notes, his closest men, and surrendered to the Americans. It was a calculated move, one that would change history. While von Braun and his colleagues waited under guard, decisions were being made in Washington. The newly formed Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency proposed something radical: bring them all to America. Not just the rocket scientists, but chemists, biologists, aviation experts, anyone whose work could serve American interests. It was a proposal that clashed with everything the Allies had just fought for. These men weren't innocent technicians. Many had been active members of the Nazi Party. Some had overseen death camps. Others had experimented on human beings in the name of science. Yet the order was signed. Their Nazi pasts would be erased or rewritten. Files would be sanitized. Names would be changed. The public would never know. What mattered was their expertise. Operation Paperclip, so named for the paperclips attached to their new American files, was officially underway. In the years that followed, hundreds of German scientists were flown to the United States under secrecy. They were given new homes, new jobs, even new identities. Some were sent to military bases in Texas and Alabama. Others to laboratories and universities. They would work on rockets, aircraft, medicine, and even psychological warfare. Many of them became celebrated figures, their Nazi affiliations buried deep beneath classified layers of bureaucracy. Wernher von Braun's team was installed at Fort Bliss, Texas. There, they began to build the foundation of what would become NASA's space program. They were hailed as pioneers of the space age, their past conveniently forgotten. Newspapers printed photographs of smiling German scientists working on American rockets, without mentioning the slaves who had died to build the originals. When the first American satellite went into orbit, it was von Braun's design that carried it. When the first man walked on the moon, it was von Braun's dream that had finally come true. The man who once built weapons for Hitler had helped humanity reach the stars. But not all paperclip recruits were rocket engineers. Some came from darker corners of the Nazi regime. Dr. Hubertus Strughold, known as the father of space medicine, had overseen experiments on concentration camp inmates exposed to freezing temperatures and low air pressure. Yet in America, he became a pioneer in aerospace physiology, working with the U.S. Air Force and even being honored by NASA. His name was attached to research grants, scholarships, and facilities, until decades later, when the truth resurfaced. Others specialized in chemical warfare. Scientists who had created deadly nerve agents like sarin and taboon were brought to Fort Detrick and Edgewood Arsenal. Their knowledge became the backbone of America's own chemical weapons programs. Some of them also contributed to psychological experiments during the 1950s, helping the CIA develop mind control projects under the infamous MKUltra program. It was a moral paradox at the heart of American victory. In defeating the Nazi regime, the U.S. had absorbed its intellectual remnants. The same government that had prosecuted Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg was quietly employing their colleagues. Behind the rhetoric of freedom and democracy lay a web of secrecy, where the ends justified the means. The public knew nothing. Journalists who asked questions were told it was a matter of national security. Files were sealed, records hidden. Even President Truman, who had initially forbidden the hiring of active Nazis, was kept in the dark about how extensively the rule was being ignored. As the Cold War deepened, the justification only grew stronger. The Soviets had captured their own share of German scientists. They were building rockets too, testing new weapons, expanding their reach. To fall behind was to risk annihilation. In that climate of fear, morality became a luxury America couldn't afford. The competition for technological dominance, atomic bombs, intercontinental missiles, spaceflight, became a race fueled by the ghosts of the Third Reich. By the 1950s, Operation Paperclip had reshaped American science. It had given the U.S. its missile program, its jet technology, its medical advancements, and ultimately its place at the forefront of the space race. Yet the cost was silence over the crimes of the men whose knowledge had built that success.